everybody, to today's webinar Wednesday. My name is Caitlin Ryan. I'm the Executive Director here at the Cannabis Alliance. And today's webinar is the dawn of a meaningful medical program here in Washington State. We have some of our panel returning from the Department of Health Town Hall that we hosted back at the beginning of December, where we had 2 hours of incredible conversation. A lot of folks there had left the evening. The feedback we got was that it was the first time patients felt heard by the Department of Health. It was the first time people had felt hopeful, really, since the passage of I-502, that we could really make something meaningful. And I think we all felt that. It was a really special conversation and an important touchstone as we are moving forward with a couple of different lanes all at the same time and finding ways to improve the medical cannabis program here in Washington State. We'll get to introductions in just a minute. I want to pause for a second, though, and thank our sponsor for today's webinar, Skagit Organics. The conversations like these are the ones, thanks, Matt, who is here on our panel too, so you'll hear more from him. But these are the kinds of conversations that actually do make meaningful change. And so just preemptively, thank you all for being willing to continue that here as well. I want to highlight a couple of things that we've got going on right now in the legislature. We're about halfway through session officially, and we do have a excise tax bill. That bill is 1453, House Bill 1453, and it is proposing that we remove the excise tax for registered patients purchasing DOH compliant product. Right now, that is a very small group of people selecting from a very small available product. And it's designed, and we'll get more into this in our conversation, but it's really designed to support patients and their needs as they're buying their medicine, and also to help maybe bring some more DOH compliant product, more medicine out onto the market. And then also at the same time, we have a complete rulemaking set open with the Department of Health, where we're sort of re-examining the entire structure of how that works and what can be most meaningful moving forward. And we have our next meeting set for February 29th. We'll talk about that again a little bit more at the end so that you make sure that you have that on your calendar. Stakeholder engagement and feedback is really what makes this process as effective as it possibly can be. And then finally, also at the Liquor and Cannabis Board, there's also another rulemaking set on medical endorsements of stores and what that mechanism looks like. And that's moving forward. We're going to be submitting some of our comments towards the end of this week as we start moving towards the CR 102 over there. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our panel for everybody to introduce yourselves. And let's see, let's go ahead. Shannon, if you don't mind starting us off.
Sounds great. I'm Shannon Engel, a Deputy Director of Drug Systems, which houses the medical cannabis program at Department of Health.
Thank you, Shannon. Lorelei.
Hi, I'm Lorelei Walker. I am the Program Manager with the Medical Cannabis Program, working in Shannon's group.
Fantastic. Thank you. Laura.
Laura Kaminsky. I am the Government Affairs Liaison at the Cannabis Alliance.
Thank you very much. John Kingsbury.
Hi, my name is John Kingsbury. I've been a medical cannabis patient since 2009. I'm chair of the patient committee of the Cannabis Alliance, and I've been working on home growth too, but that's me.
Thank you, John. TJ.
Hi, everybody. My name is TJ Johnson. I'm a microbiologist with the Department of Health working the medical cannabis program. Thank you.
Thank you. Johnny. If you're available. If not, Matt, why don't you go ahead?
Yes. Hello, my name is Matthew Friedlander. I'm one of the owners of Skagit Organics. We are one of the only licensed cannabis companies in Washington that is creating DOH compliant product.
Thanks, Matt. And Annie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Annie Cause. I also work on the medical cannabis program. I support consultants and patients, and I participated in the last panel, so I'm really excited to be here and get the conversation going again. So thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Okay, well, I think, like I had said, we had a really robust conversation and 2.5 hours flew by and no time flat. And so we know that this is an ongoing conversation, but I'm sort of curious to hear from everybody. What has been rolling around with you since then? It's been nearly 2 months. I know we've been having conversations here within the Cannabis Alliance about some of the things that were shared and that have been talked about. There were a couple of items that were like, oh my gosh, how have we never thought of that, thought of that before? And then others that were like, yeah, I think this is pretty common across the board that we all agree that this is an easy lane for change. What have you all been talking about and thinking about?
Should I start?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave pregnant pauses, y'all. So whoever wants to go.
Okay. All right. So again, just to reiterate, what I heard that surprised me was a lot from people from the patient community who came, who I wouldn't have normally anticipated walking away having a good feeling about it, said just the opposite. And that was almost universal. So I was really pleasantly surprised by that, and it gave me some optimism. As far as what I'm thinking about moving forward, we're engaged in these projects anyway. It seems like we're always pushing anyway, town hall or no town hall. So I think the medically compliant rules that we're rulemaking that we're engaged in is going to affect the whole ecosystem in a really important way. So I'm kind of focused on making sure that that I do a good part on that, and the endorsement rules as well. I think it's all part of the same pie. And if we can get those pieces in place, I think that gives us a lot of hope. So sort of just the practical mechanics of it, I think that are what I've been thinking about.
I mean, I will reiterate the breath of fresh air that continues to permeate, these conversations. It's just been a really long time since the rules were written, since we've had active engagement from DOH, and it just continues to be it just continues to be lovely, that we can actually have these conversations and express, how these disparate voices feel, and really feel heard, like Caitlin said. I mean, it's really powerful and should not be overlooked in any way. So, I'm glad you continue to show up in the ways that you show up and the numbers that you do. It's really wonderful. And I look forward to all the great things that we can accomplish together.
I can piggyback a little on that. It is, I know for me, and I think I speak for the program too, it has been really eye-opening just for us to hear the feedback, the information, the calls that came after the town hall were calls that we've not always fielded, that was just bringing more information to light and showing where our program can grow, but also just being there to hear what people have to say that are affected by the medical cannabis in Washington State, and where we can grow from here. So that has been that's been a very empowering thing, I think, for our team, and kind of an exciting moment for us as a team moving forward. I know one of the things that I've been sitting with is actually, I think, something that you said, John, at the meeting, was kind of the way that we are approaching medical cannabis patients and all the steps and regulatory things that have to be ran through for them to receive their product and medication versus recreational product, and how that is able to be disseminated through the stores, but as you just walk in, show your ID, and then walking out. That really resonated with me, that statement, just thinking of it in a way of, with any changes that are coming down in the future, how can we ensure more ease of use, ease of access, and just the ability to be more understanding to this specific group. So that's been just anything that in our discussions, meetings, it's always been at the top of my head thinking about that statement. So.
I have to say that I was surprised by the number of faces that showed up. I think part of the challenge over the years from my end has been oftentimes there's been a half-time employee, that's sort of been our contact as the medical marijuana coordinator, and just seeing so many faces, I'm sure it was more than me that just said, where did all these people show up and why? So
Yeah, and I think too, what was interesting to me, John, like you had pointed out, there are some, we've been working with the patient community since the beginning of the Cannabis Alliance. And in honesty, 5052, which was a piece of legislation that was passed early on, we formed in response to that legislation being passed because, it was still early on enough that, new licensees, we didn't quite have a handle on what the legislative process was. It was just a lot fast all at once. And so then something like 5052 came through, which then established a lot of the medical cannabis sort of guidelines and rules that we have now, and they're not great. And so some of the folks that we got to hear from were people who were very involved, and then following that really heartbreaking experience sort of just felt left out, and guaranteed that they weren't being heard. And so to have that community back together in a room together was, I think, heartwarming for a lot of people to see some faces they might not have seen in a while. And then also, yeah, to then have walked away feeling like, gosh, there's something we might have something here, this conversation. And I'll echo what Laura said. I think that's a lot of the credit to the medical cannabis program folks that we have here with us from the Department of Health, and just your willingness to listen and hear. And even, Shannon, like you said, even if it doesn't necessarily have a pointed action item, or it's an action item that might be outside of the scope of what we can do here, your willingness to just listen. The patient experience is often one of powerlessness to the system. There's physical and emotional pain that folks are struggling with. And just having the opportunity to be heard can also be a really powerful experience. Now, to take it to, though, some of those very specific things that kind of came out of that, and feel free to chime in if you have additional thoughts as we're moving forward. But we had some really very specific suggestions, and like one moment that I think, even though I was only online and wasn't able to be there in person, I could hear the reaction in the room. There was one attendee who was wheelchair bound, and he made the comment of, can we get these, does this have to be annual? I'm not suddenly going to start walking. I'm not going to get better. This is my life. Is there any way that we can sort of extend those endorsements moving forward? I'm kind of curious if you all have started having chats about things like that, some of those action items, and whether or not that's possible in this rulemaking set, or if that needs to be done elsewhere. Yeah, Lorelei.
So I do want to chime in about stuff, like just a real quick administrative thing. Reem Aldagostani from our team, I think she's in the waiting room. She's been having some trouble getting in. I don't know if
because she is not named. We've been sending her messages, but I think I can see who that is. Thank you so much, Lorelei.
Thank you.
So sort of curious.
Yeah, I can take that one from kind of what, because that was one of the items that was on our list as well. It was actually a discussion point that we'd been talking about prior to the town hall, because there's many conditions that are listed on there that don't just go away. So in reviewing it, one of the things that we've been kind of keeping it on our radar is it's a statutory change that would be required. And so it's not something that can be evaluated just with the rule, but we'd actually have to look at some changes to the RCW for that. That said, this discussion, we've actually received calls on this. We have this question come up often in our customer service and our emails, and so we had already had it on our radar that this was one of the items we'd like to look at if we're able to make movement in any type of agency requested legislation or any type of legislation that comes forward that we're able to provide any feedback through. But we did look to see what kind of opportunities there would be, and it does look like it's a statute change.
Okay. And so this is a great sort of opportunity, you know, and for us here at the Cannabis Alliance, we kind of occupy all of those lanes. So that helps us know that that's the case, because now it's time for us to start talking to legislators, or perhaps within the DOH to start maybe pushing the envelope on agency request, possibly, but start looking at what that legislative process needs to be for a change like that. Yeah, Lorelei.
Yeah, so just to tag on to that, just kind of from an organizational perspective, we've taken a lot of the feedback from the town hall and really tried to organize it by what changes we think we can make just implementation wise. We don't need to make rule changes. What issues were brought up that we think in one of our 3 chapters of WAC we could do rulemaking on. And then, of course, those things that would take legislative changes. So we're working on that and planning to contribute that in organization for everyone's priorities. And I think our team, you know, has an eye towards getting into doing strategic planning so that we can evaluate sort of the picture, what we can do, and what projects might give the biggest impact to prioritize.
Wonderful. Thank you. John.
I don't want to derail Lorelei's thought there, because I think that's a good thread to follow. But I do have a question from Shannon. If you've evaluated this for renewals, what are you thinking in terms of what's different from a compassionate care renewal? Because that already exists. So what additional thing have you been discussing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of the feedback that we've been receiving even prior to the town hall was that certain conditions or the qualifying conditions that are there, even just getting a healthcare authorization done every year when the condition isn't changing, it has posed some challenges to patients. And this is just feedback that we've received. The compassionate care allows for that designated provider to go in and renew for the patient. But if depending on the condition, we've heard that even sometimes the designated provider doesn't necessarily want to leave the patient to go do that task on an annual basis either. So that's some of the feedback that we've received in the last year or so, that we just kind of had this a little bit on our radar. And like Lorelei was saying, it was one of the things when we were looking at the feedback from the town hall, kind of trying to separate it into different types of scope and steps as to what would be rule, what would be statute, what's DOH versus what's LCB, and looking at kind of coming up with some planning around that in the future.
Fantastic. Now, and then yeah, Lara.
Just really quickly, like, how accessible are these lists going to be to the general public in terms of us, you know, in the terms of, oh, okay, we understand the clear lanes and we can also work on, you know, on the behalf of these initiatives. Just how, you know, I'd be curious to see your lists, I guess.
Yes, I think your group would be, you know, the first that we would share. We want to develop something more for public consumption. Right now, I think we have it in a place, and Shannon and team want to check in. We need to flesh it out just a little bit more, get some of those RCW references and kind of complete thoughts about what potential solutions could be. But I think very soon we could have a discussion with a group from the Alliance to go over that and then talk about collectively what could that look like for a public facing document.
Great.
Yeah, to follow up just a little bit, like Lorelei was saying, our goal is to actually have something that we wanted to make sure that the thoughts that we heard was actually what was shared. And so sometimes, you know, while we're taking notes sometimes interpretations can be a little different. So our goal is to kind of come up with these this broad view of what we heard and where they kind of fall, and actually name out the WACs and RCWs that they fall under, and then share that with the Alliance, and then share it out even like in a newsletter type of listserv eventually, just kind of getting it all in one place and fine tuning it.
Great. That'd be super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, then there were sort of other things that were important for I think the conversation in general. Like John, you had pointed out, we've got these couple of lanes that are all sort of pieces of the same pie. And one of the ones that we all kind of went, oh my gosh, why have we not thought about this before? There's an answer to that question, but and that was medically endorsed stores being ADA accessible. So while that doesn't apply to the DOH rulemaking, it does apply to the medical compliance rulemaking that we have going on at LCB, and that's one that we certainly will include in there. Did anybody else have anything like that, or is just like, of course we should be thinking about this? Yeah, John.
I actually looked into that one item.
Oh.
And I talked to a commercial real estate person, and they said all those stores should be as a matter of zoning. And so that the way to tackle that you could go to LCB and say, can you add this to your list when you do site checks? Whether or not, because, and where that might fall down would be if whoever checked them for zoning for their business, to open their business, they already have that requirement. Maybe they cut somebody some slack or fell down on the job or missed that checklist if they aren't really accessible. So instead of adding that as a rule, it should already be a requirement in every newly open. I think after there's some rule about if the business opened after 74 or something, which I assume all 502 stores have been, that should already be a requirement, and it would be more a matter of checking, and that the way to do that would be maybe to ask LCB if they'd be willing to make sure that store is accessible. So at least you could follow up with the city or something like that. So problem solved.
Well, yeah. Which, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts passing through just in terms of, if or have somebody in your life that is challenged with mobility, that gosh, the battle to have accessibility is tremendous across the board everywhere. And so thanks, John, for doing that follow-up, because we would like this to be not one of the areas where folks have to fight so hard. Any other thoughts on that? Or, that original question, any other like big ones that from that conversation that came up that you went, ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
I think kind of along the same lines as kind of how the retail store is laid out, but also what I heard throughout the entire town hall was just going in as a patient, trying to access, their medication through a point of a retail outlet, and the challenges that come with that. And so not only with the accessibility piece, but also just in general as to the customer service that they're able to receive, the location they're able to receive it in, how they can have these somewhat uncomfortable conversations when you're in a retail store that has multiple other people. That was a thread I heard throughout the entire town hall. That's also been something kind of just that I never really thought about from that aspect, and was really appreciative that it kept coming up. Kind of opened my eyes a little bit to that piece.
Well, and I'm just going to piggyback on that one, because I have heard that quite a bit, and it's a really challenging piece of the puzzle, because once again we're dealing with a marketplace where the primary interest that they're feeling is coming from a certain segment of the population. It's not that the patient population isn't interested in accessing their medicine. It's just not necessarily how the retailers have been set up to this point. And I know this is kind of giving a little bit ahead of the schedule of things we want to talk about, but it's part of the whole reason for the tax bill, right? Is, making going into one of these stores more attractive to patients because they don't have to pay a sales or the excise tax. But right now, the business of these retail stores is primarily targeting a certain kind of clientele. And I have known a few stores that have really tried to create separate spaces. There's one store that even it was almost like two storefronts. It was incredible. One was for retail, one was for patients, but the overhead of that, the upkeep of that, like it's, these business considerations that come into play when you're putting them together in the way that they're together. There's just some things, there's challenges to overcome. And I don't necessarily have the answer to them. It's just one of the, the points that, I hear from the patients about their accessibility and those difficult conversations. And then also from the businesses that are saying, it's really hard to set up a whole separate space in these environments. So.
Yeah, well, I was talking with a bud tender yesterday who was talking about the store that she works in, which is known also for, for a medical product. And just the retail side alone, there are some days of the week and consistently, like at least a couple of days of the week, where the line for service is wrapped around itself. And so that's just consumers. And then imagine you're a patient needing to have a medical consultation, a little bit of assistance finding exactly the product you're looking for. And that's the environment that you're doing that in. And that's, I think that's when you get in your car or the car that brought you there and turn around, right? And maybe you go without that day. Matt, I know you have, your company is really well known for its medical grade product. I know you have people reach out to you directly. When you're looking for a location to send them to, do you sort of have a criteria, like what your the type of retail store that you're sending people to find your product?
I mean, the main thing we look for is just somebody that's willing to engage with us, a buyer or manager of the stores, that is willing to take the time once we are able to get a patient set up with what they need, and so they know they can walk in and pretty much know what they need, or we will even send products specifically for individual people. But again, we need a store manager or buyer, someone at the location that's willing to engage and take the time to do that. But yeah, I mean, one of the points I brought up at the meeting at the town hall last time was essentially trying to utilize the current rules or to get some clarification on being able to do as much of the process for the patient remotely outside of the store, so that they can just go into the store and have the information they need to find the product they want, so that they don't have to spend a lot of time on the floor with an employee or two, taking away from the customer service of everyone else that might be in the store that needs help as well.
Yeah, because we actually get this question somewhat frequently, where somebody has gotten their medical consultancy, but they're not interested in being a bud tender in that way. Like they really truly just want to work with patients. And the rules are a little kind of like we've had a couple of different interpretations that in order to be a medical consultant, you have to be you have to be employed by a shop. But then there's sort of an end around. I'm not necessarily asking for an interpretation here on the spot, but I would imagine, the ability to provide medical consultant services outside of that store setting would be tremendously powerful. We heard a lot from our community, especially once we went all on Zoom there for a while, that the accessibility skyrocketed, for a lot of folks to be able to participate that way. John?
Yeah, I mean, if it's unreasonable, it's unreasonable to ask a retail store to employ, multiple consultants to try to have someone at the store every hour that the store is open. That's just, not a thing that's going to happen. So yeah, having that remote access would be, I think, very beneficial.
Yeah, John.
So I certainly know we know this in the Alliance, but there is a range of quality of health. There are people that get bud tender, get their consultant training. I go to stores where they think medical marijuana is basically 10% off sales tax, and that's kind of the whole of it. And they might hire somebody to sign them into the system, but that's the level of their commitment. And then I know a lot of consultants that, again, as Laura said, they're not so interested in being bud tenders, but they are knowledgeable and want to help patients. And I wonder if there's a way to sort of make a space for those people to operate better, you know, and a way for patients to find them. And I'm not sure what the answer is. I do know the RCW says that a consultant has to be employed by a store, but I wonder if there's a way, if this is a worthwhile project to expand that, because I think Laura described what sounded to me like Novelty, where they have a rec store that's like every other rec store, and there's another space with little privacy things in, and the people working in there, they know their medical cannabis, and it is a completely different feeling. And I think about what if my mother got sick and she needed help because she wouldn't know what to do. I don't know that I'd feel comfortable sending her into a normal weed shop, you know, endorsement or no endorsement. You know, she needs more help than that. And she needs to be in a different environment than, you know, what are your cheapest dabs and that sort of thing, you know? And I wonder, I think it's worthwhile trying to see what can be done. I think some of it probably is going to have to be legislation, but I think that this is an area that needs to be explored, where a lot of people see that we could really do better and really help the people who deserve to be helped and need to be helped, but we're sort of constrained in some ways. And I think this should be a longer term discussion. So
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah, just tagging on that. I mean, the first thing that pops to my head is like a list of consultants hosted by DOH, so we know who they are, you know, maybe which stores they're in. But gosh, if there could be like a telemedicine piece of it too, where, okay, here's the list of consultants that are available. They've gone through all the training, they're up to date, schedule an appointment to have a telemedicine. And then you can go in and actually get your products after feeling like, because the other piece of it, to John's point, is it can be really intimidating to walk into some of those stores if you're not a recreational consumer, right? They're, for better or worse, you know, geared towards a certain demographic, and you can just feel really intimidating. And so somebody who can maybe get the information that they're seeking without actually physically having to go there, for not just for that piece of it, but just for mobility issues, and then, you know, then get some of their questions answered before they ever have to actually step in a store.
Well, I mean, I'll add on to that. The language about being employed is not 100% that strict. It does, I believe there is opportunities for consultants to be volunteers or to work in connection with a store. So again, that's, you know, in the town hall, I suggested, you know, some clarification from the DOH on that as to what kind of leeway is already available with the interpretation of the language that's already there. But one thing also, to John's point of a list of consultants and a list of stores, one project that did come out of the patient committee that the Alliance hosts is the website, medicalcannabiswa.com, that does list some of this information. It's a project that's in the works, and but there is some patient-facing information available at that website that does provide some access to licensed consultants.
Thanks, Matt. And we'll get that in the chat too, in case folks want to check it out and see what we've got going there. And what I am hearing is medical consultancy is a topic we'd like to spend some more time on overall, which is great. And I couldn't agree more. And actually, while you were talking, I was thinking, oh my gosh. And then imagine if folks could be together, medical consultants together, you know, one of the other things that had come up was the need for more new training materials for that medical consultancy program, and sort of I don't know if they'd be called CMEs exactly, but you know, continuing education opportunities that once you've passed, that there's sort of three places where we get curriculum from, and some are better than others, and making sure that that is fresh and updated information. And even if you are sort of going through those programs regularly, it would be great to have more of that for our medical consultants. And I think a lot of those things sometimes come out of development of community of folks who are doing that work themselves, where they might then, once they start sharing stories with each other, go, oh, you know what would be really helpful to know more about. And then that could be a really fertile place for idea generation for more training opportunities as well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
DOH, which is there a formal process by which we can request an interpretation of a rule? Like, you know, is there a formal process to say what are the ranges of what consultancy includes in your interpretation? Is there a formal way to do that?
That's a really good question. So I'm not quite sure. Are you speaking to rule or statute or both?
I think I'm probably speaking of interpretive statements, which is short of a rulemaking, but you know,
so
let's
probably
just
both
understand the rule better.
and each.
Yes, yeah. So we have a policy team at DOH that we go through, like when a rule chapter is open, there's our rules coordinator that walks us through all the steps to make sure that we're following the 102,
Right.
103 process, all of that. It's something similar to that with a formal policy or interpretive statement. What I do know is most of the time, because when I was listening to it, it sounded like if there's something that's in rule that you want to know how it's interpreted, that's the process you're looking to get. And so our first step would be reaching out to sending us I don't think we have a formal request for that, but it's one of the things where we get inquiries like that, where then we reach out to our attorney general or assistant attorney general to get some clarification feedback using the statutes and the rule to see what that would look like, and then we respond with what that is. That's the process that I know of right now. Lorelai, do you know of another process?
Well, I'm kind of thinking to my veterinary board and optometry board days, and there's not a formal kind of form or process to pose the question or for us to get those requests. But I think, we can take that information and talk with our AAG, talk with our policy folks about would a response, need that formal interpretive statement? Can we give it sort of in the form of technical assistance? But I think it's not a formal process, kind of like the rule petition. There are forms out there.
And I think one of the other pieces to that just might be interesting to kind of be on our radar, kind of look into a little more. So take, for example, the consultant rule piece or the consultant piece in legislation that's under the 6951A about, the volunteer piece or employee piece, but then that also references 6950, the statute that requires just for a medical endorsement to have a consultant. And so starting the conversation, doing the interpretive statements or whatever it may look like, it could also be that it's a thing that goes into both realms of LCB and DOH, that we would then have to look at both rule sets or both statutes as a part of that process. So I think that would be something very helpful.
Fantastic. It sounds like we have an action item, Matt. Okay. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about medicine itself. We've talked a little bit again, actually pretty much sort of following a lot of the conversation that we had at the town hall, which is sort of patient status and access. And then the medicine itself, one of you all know, I kind of caught by surprise. We use this live polling program where we were in the town hall to sort of get some information from folks that everybody could participate in. And I got caught off guard by not supplying a high enough dollar amount for the amount of money people spend on their medicine every month. And then was blown away to find out how high that number actually went for some folks. Let's see, I had them right here. But the also more compelling piece to this for me was, where do you get your medicine? And we had home cultivation, buying at the store, buying in the unregulated market, gifted, sort of a patchwork of supply, and then somebody grows for them. And the two smallest categories, with just a couple of yeses, was people growing at home, either having somebody grow for them or them growing their own plant medicine, which we kind of is actually not super surprising, because it's actually pretty hard to reliably grow your own cannabis at home. John, you looked like you had a thought there, or no?
And no, I wasn't. My hand wasn't up. I was.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Thank you, though.
Yeah, of course. And then it was right around 32% of the product patients are using are actually bought at the store. And then the next highest category after that was a patchwork of supply, tied nearly with buying in the unregulated market, which I found really interesting. And then a good number of people rely on donations and gifting of medicine. And even with that, so still way less than half of the medicine that patients are accessing is actually purchased in the market. People were still the greatest cluster of dollar amount was between $500 and $1,000 a month, of which, by the way, people are being taxed 37% on that dollar amount. But it went up to $5,000 plus, which we got to help that person out. I think we've had conversations say that's untenable. That's untenable. That's not sustainable over time. And I bring this up because of this excise tax bill that we currently have in the legislature. February 13th is the cutoff for the House of Origin. It's currently sitting in the Rules Committee. We know that in the House, it's gone through the Senate 3 times already, and each time it's passed the Senate, it has increased in support. We know that this is bipartisan. We're going to be sharing some patient testimony over the next couple of days out on social media, so keep an eye out for that. I just kind of want to put it here, like, for those of you that heard patients talking about this, for me, this feels like the most heartbreaking piece of it all, that we had a medical system prior to I-502 where, you know, it wasn't ideal, but the patient community did a good job of caring for each other and caring for itself. By and large, people didn't go in need if they, you know, needed some additional support, and certainly the dollar amount wasn't this. And instead now we have, you know, we've talked about it in a couple of different lanes. We have a system that really caters more towards that commercial retail, revenue generating approach to cannabis. And there's certainly a lane for that. And we absolutely understand that our state at this point relies pretty heavily on, I think it's nearly $1 billion a biennium that goes into our state coffers from cannabis tax revenue. But when we're talking about such a small group of people who are selecting from such a small amount of medicine, the fiscal note on this is tiny. It's right around $40,000, which speaks to a lot of things, right? It speaks to the amount of participation, both for medically compliant product as well as registered patients. And then I think it has a lot to do with exactly what we just saw here. The next largest place that people get their money or get their medicine is from the unregulated market, and all of the challenges that come with that. And the reason, you know, At any rate, I could go on and on about this. Laura, do you want to share a little bit more too? We've talked a bit about gaming the system. I hope that after some of this conversation, we can sort of understand how silly that is. Do you want to say a few words about that? Oh, but you are on mute.
Yes, I was. Yeah, I mean, I think it's the only, in terms of this piece of legislation that we put forward, it's the only piece that we've heard concern around. The concept is there. People don't, generally are like, yeah, we shouldn't be taxing people for medicine, but how do we make sure they're real patients? And how do we make sure that, people aren't gonna like all of a sudden start jumping on the registry to get these cheaper products? And for those that know, like that seems crazy, but we realized that we needed to really actually we needed to spell it out. And so we did some research around what is the cost of these compliant products and how do they compare? And what we found across the board is that they are significantly more expensive because of all the additional things that go into manufacturing them. So even with that reduction in the tax, they are not the cheapest thing on the shelf. That if you wanted to get a cheap product, you can just walk into the store, right? And then add to that the getting on the registry, becoming a qualified patient is no small task, and it has to happen, as we've been talking about, annually. There's lots of hurdles to get over. There is cost involved in that. You do have to have a qualifying condition. This is not something that's easily done. I think there's still those memories of, prior to legalization when that was the only way that people were accessing cannabis. But that's no longer the environment that we work in. So those 2 points in particular, I think pretty much puts that issue to bed. There's really no incentive whatsoever to game a system that really you're not even going to get the cheapest stuff if you did. So yeah. Is that what you
Can I add here too, just as a counterpoint? I am surprised and discouraged, and in other ways not surprised, how much participation I still see from patients in the unregulated market. Because part of me says these people deserve to have safe, appropriate access in an environment where there's no risk for them. We shouldn't be coerced into more criminal behavior more than somebody that just wants to recreate during the weekend. And I just think that if we have legalization that leaves out patients, which we kind of do in a way, I just think that's tragic and also unnecessary. And even if we're not paying into the state coffers for taxes, we would want, why shouldn't the balance of that money, the purchase, go to farmers who are licensed and regulated and monitored, and instead of people who aren't, right? Even if we're not adding to the excise tax base, it's very upside down. And I think it feels for a lot of patients like legalization happened for the recreational user, but it actually got dialed back for people who have authorizations. So, and not to be a downer, but I think that really is sort of the picture for a lot of people. And I think that's worth trying to reverse. So.
Yeah, TJ.
Unmute myself. One thing that I've kind of been following a bit is, regarding how much product is available for everybody, how much medicine is out there. I know LCB has a petition that they're looking at right now regarding heavy metal testing for all of the products in general. I have my thoughts and ideas on that, but I wanted to kind of hear from the patient community, like, your guys' opinions and your thoughts on that.
On the LCB proposed rulemaking?
Yeah.
I think it came directly from the patient community. Because folks want, and I think it has a lot to do with expanding that level, that feeling of safety for more products, because, you know, as I'm sure you're finding out when you're starting to track how much DOH compliant product is actually out there for people to access, depending on where you live, it can be almost impossible to be able to maintain a supply that's good enough. And so maybe if patients felt more comfortable with more product types, that could expand access to medicine in that regard. John, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that, but yeah, I agree with you completely that that comes from the patient community, and it reflects a lack of confidence in the supply that's out there. The irony of it is, okay, are you then seeking it from the unregulated system? You know, and how much confidence do you have there? But I think it's a complicated thing. I do think about the cost. Is that going to put that product out of reach? But I do think it is worth asking the question, you know, is if recreational product really is the medical product for this state right now, can patients have enough confidence in it? You know, I think that's a valid question to ask, because really the recreational product is the medical market in this state in the regulated system. And so I think that ups the ante a little. So
I do think that there are some additional, I mean, as you've seen in the rule request, there are some additional things that patients would like to see when it comes to their medicine, you know, in terms of residual solvents, certain information being required. Like you know, while I think it's great to continue to improve the quality of all products, I think patients are always going to continue to seek as much as they can in terms of information and cleanliness. So I don't know if there is just you've achieved the bar, you know, necessarily by adding one or two things. I think, you know, patients are going to continue to request, like, you know, I mean, even when it comes to some of the closed loop systems that we had initially when we set up this market, where there was like a period of time that producers could bring in their seeds and their plants and that was it, you know? And so it's like, how do we access the, you know, the types of medicine that we're actually looking for? I just think it's a long ongoing conversation that we'll continue to need to, you know, refine to make sure that we actually have true medicine, if that's what we're after.
I think there's another issue too. One is, so heavy metals is a hygiene issue, right? Is this safe? Is this going to poison me? To sort of expand a little on what Laura said, I think the other thing that patients look for and require would be, we worry about neem oil and neem oil derivatives a lot. So for us, that's a hygiene issue, and I hardly ever hear recreational users concerned about that. But then the third thing is, insofar as medicine, patients look at terpenes all the time. And unless you're really an enthusiastic recreational user, you're not going to really care about that as much as we do. And we care about it because, is it having the other effects? Is it actually aggravating neuropathic pain? Things like that terpenes can really affect. And your recreational user may not look at that as much, but patients do all of the time. So, you know, that's not a hygiene issue in a certain way, but it is important labeling information. It's important testing information. So.
Which is a perfect segue into my final question. We're getting really, really close to time, so I'm sorry that I'm going to ask you to kind of keep the answer to it truncated as we round out our hour here. We might go just a couple of minutes over, but I promise we're coming here to the close. And it is first reflective of what's happening at the federal level. We had something incredible, groundbreaking happen in the interim of the time we met last and today, and that was that the federal government for the first time went on record acknowledging that there is medical applications for the use of cannabis. Yeah, that's a big deal. What that means from a policy perspective and whether that's a good thing for licensees and for patients and all of that really still has yet to be seen. But just that singular piece, that little component right there was a huge a BFD. It's a big fucking deal. So that's really exciting. Which brings me to that existential question that I had that we'll kind of wrap up with in a small bite. For anybody here, what do you feel is the importance of having this medical cannabis program? We've talked about things like access, ease of use, safe product, hygiene, things like that. But in all of this conversation, we heard a little bit this idea of maybe moving recreational towards something that might be happier for patients, but I still see a need for this this lane of a medical program really to protect that access to medicine, because we can already see the ways that it's been eroded by, and love our recreational users too. That's great. But I think we need to be able to still maintain both because patients still need that access. What are your thoughts on that sort of question? Why maintain this? Why try to improve it?
I can give a little personal story that happened like this week. So I have my mother, obviously in my life, and then I have a couple of older women who are getting to that point in their lives where, they're facing health issues that aren't like terrible catastrophic issues, but cause pretty significant daily pain. That is not, being helped by traditional things, or they can't take the traditional things for whatever reason. And, I feel like are exactly that demographic of folks who feel like they've kind of tried everything, and they're at the point where this is kind of like the last resort. But then feeling like they don't know how to access it, feeling like it's so out of reach for them in multiple ways. They don't have the language for it. They don't know where to get it. The price is out of reach. Like they're like, if I need this constantly at this time of my life, like going to the store and $60 a pop for a tincture bottle that's this big that's a lot, for somebody who is on Social Security. And, so it became really personal. It's personal every day, I think, for all of us, that there is a specific need that is outside of a recreational commercial need, and that we should care for it.
Well, I mean, I think one thing we can all agree on, the healthcare system in this country is not fantastic. Anything we can do to steer people back towards natural medicines, plant medicines, actual health and wellness, lifestyle improvements, over, pharmaceuticals and treating symptoms, is the benefit. And I think cannabis can offer that.
I think it's absolutely routine in the Alliance that we see people who say, this utterly changed the quality of my life. It is absolutely routine in the patient community that I know, that it's not, I found this thing. It is, I'm not taking all these other pills anymore. And that's why my quality of life has improved. One of the worst things I ever hear is getting what I need, accessing in the current environment is so hard that I think I'm going to give up and start eating those pills again. And if you're giving up your opioids, which is absolutely routine, if you're giving up your gabapentin, which is absolutely routine in the cannabis environment, that's a huge jump in the quality of life. And when I see people that say this access is just too hard, I'm going to have to go back there because my symptoms exist no matter what. I don't have control over that. I need to, and knowing what that does to quality of life, we've all heard the stories, and I know people personally who say, I was on 60 milligrams of OxyContin a day and I'm not anymore. I was on 1200 milligrams of gabapentin and I'm not anymore. That's what it's about. But those people that are using for that reason, it's really hard to get that need met either in medical information or access information or in a compassionate way in a recreational store, because they're just completely different purposes. One of my huge pet peeves is people that say all use is medical use. That just makes me insane. Because if you're struggling with MS or you're struggling with chronic pain or, you know, any number of ailments, every reason you're accessing is completely different and your needs are different, and the level of compassion and, you know, attention you need is different, and the quality of information you require for your really specific use is entirely different. And that's why you need a different system that sees those things are different in a medical patient and thinks it's important to address them. And I just don't see the two markets as the same at all. And that's just based on the people I know.
Mhm.
So
Thanks, John. Any other final thoughts?
I think one of the things, especially with that kind of, you know, the goal of the program moving forward and the goal of what we can do here for Washington State and the medical cannabis program, I think one of the biggest things that our team is trying to really do is we have on our website, we have our 3 scopes, right? DOH was provided with statutes that required us to do 3 different scopes regarding this medical program, which all makes sense, you know, compliant product, the database, and the medical consultants, right? But one of the things I think as a team we're trying to really do is keep people in that scope. So, and it's, what does it affect for patients? What does it affect for retailers? What does it mean for the producer processors? What does it mean for the labs, small businesses that are out there? And really trying to keep in whatever planning, whatever meetings we're having, that the people matter within our scopes. And that's what I think is an important message for us to focus on as a state agency, just in general, and really as we're looking to how we can improve this industry, how we can improve the medical cannabis program.
Yeah, I'll tag on to that really quickly. I mean, it comes down to our mission. It's the filter through which we should be looking when we're doing anything, and that is service to the public, protection, and access, balancing those 2 things. So kind of goes back to strategic planning that I think we want to build on. That's the lens we're looking through for anything we do.
I think that's a perfect button on it. Just like we ended our town hall back at the beginning of December, there is so much more to talk about. I want to thank you to the Department of Health, especially for your willingness to, like Laura said at the beginning, to continue to show up and engage. Really, truly, thank you. It means the world and gives us a lot of hope for what's to come. So thank you very, very much.
And we appreciate being invited and the conversations and the communication. We appreciate it greatly as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Here at the Cannabis Alliance, we're dedicated to the advancement of a vital, ethical, equitable, and sustainable cannabis industry. Again, I want to thank Skagit Organics for your sponsorship of this today. And then remind everybody the next time we'll all be on Zoom again together will be on February 29th. You can get more information about date and links and all of that stuff on the DOH webs. It's up on the website? Yes. We'll have it out. I know that we have the notice, and so we'll make sure that it's published out. Thank you all very much for being here today.